Do you like testimonies of overcoming? Saved and Strong shares stories of people who have overcome struggles to find strength. Each episode inspires resilience, hope, and faith, reminding listeners they're not alone.
Hi, this is Carrie Watts with the Saved and Strong podcast. I'm here today with Brittany Poppe. Brittany is an advocate for women who have had an abortion. She is a pro-life speaker and abortion recovery coach. Brittany, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Absolutely, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Great. Your website is beautiful. I want to tell our audience where to go and find you so they can get to know you a little better. It's BrittanyPoppe.com. That's Poppe. She's got just a beautiful branding and presence there. But more than anything is her heart for women who are healing from the past, especially about a decision for an abortion. You know, I love the day and age that we live in because we can share our stories more openly than we could in the past. We are giving a voice to the women who never felt like they could say anything. Share with us a little bit about your past and how it brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in a Christian home. I had and have loving parents that raised me to know Jesus. And I am so grateful for that because even though I walked away for a time, I believe that foundation made it easier for me to take that step of obedience when I needed to. And so I was raised in the church, and that was our foundation through my dad's terminal illness diagnosis when I was 6. He actually bravely fought that for 10 years. So we had 10 years with him after that diagnosis. And then he passed away when I was 15. And that's when I kind of started to turn away from my faith. Not necessarily because I was consciously saying things like I was mad at God or, things that we sometimes do when we lose somebody. But I really just wasn't interested in those things anymore. A year and a half later, found myself in an unplanned pregnancy and a secret relationship that I was hiding from my mom. And the only option I could think of to try to live my life as normally as I could was to have an abortion, because that meant that all of my secrets would stay hidden, or so I thought. And I was very wrong about that. One, because I knew what I was doing, and once that was over, the reality of what I had just done was so real. Also, because I believe what is done in darkness always comes to light, and that did come to light very quickly. My mom did end up finding out about that. And so that really just led me down a journey of self-destruction for a little over 10 years until I finally was able to step out in obedience. God had been pursuing me the whole time, and I finally grabbed his hand back and was able to learn his character and understand it for the first time and realize that he loved me and that he met me with compassion and mercy in my sin. And that once I had truthfully and genuinely repented for that sin, he remembered it no more. And that's where he has me now today.
Beautiful. What a testimony of freedom, right? And that's what I hear in your voice is, hey, I made this mistake, but that doesn't define who I am. So who are you today? Tell us a little bit about the day in the life of Brittany.
Yeah, so I'm a wife and a mom of 3. One of them actually hasn't been born yet. So my husband and I will be having our third in the beginning of October. So we are getting very excited for that. My other 2 kids are so excited to have a baby sibling. And I am grateful to be able to stay home with them. And we do a hybrid homeschooling program. So my daughter is old enough for school. And so we do some school with her at home. And then she gets to go have some fun with friends a couple days a week. And my husband works in the public school system. I also am just grateful to be able to work in this pro-life mission field and the post-abortion mission field when I have free time away from my family to just help really save the lost and help women like me understand that God hasn't forgotten them and that he loves them so much.
Right. Yeah. Well, congratulations on your pregnancy. When is your baby due?
Thank you. October 5th.
So I listened to one of Brittany's podcasts yesterday, and she so beautifully shares vulnerably, very raw, and really meets the woman that's listening where she is. Would you like to share a little bit about what brought you to a place where you felt like you needed to be more public about your abortion and your recovery?
Yeah, I love that question because it really took several years for me to step out and share my story, because I think when we've done something so kind of, I guess, taboo, I don't know if that's necessarily the word I'm looking for, but the word abortion is kind of taboo in our culture. If you say that word in a group of people, you can see a physical reaction. I really felt that God was asking me to step out and start sharing my story. And I'm so glad that He led me the way He did, because I really needed to find some foundational healing first. And I really think that there's a lot of importance in community and being able to reach out to somebody that you know that you can trust. And He had placed a woman in my life who I knew had had an abortion, and she also had a post-abortion ministry. And because I knew that, I felt that it was safe for me to reach out to her. She knew my story, but I had never really sought out any sort of healing for that. And so she was able to partner with me and with God to help me find that healing. And through that, I connected with another woman who is very involved in this work. She's been in this work for over 40 years. She's a spiritual mentor in my life, and she really taught me a lot of what I know about sharing the truth in love and meeting women in compassion, and also, others in compassion, because I think it's important to look at the fact that not only do we share our stories for women who need healing, but we also share our stories to change the public's view of who women who have abortions are and what this issue entails. When God calls you to something, He equips you. So I would have found a way somehow through Him, but I believe He used those women to help me.
Yes, I agree. Community is so important. In a faith-filled, Jesus-loving woman's life, we just love to have friends, but it's no fun when those friendships are on the surface level. It's so much better when you can get deep and just be yourself, and people love you no matter what you've done or where you've come from. Having those, like you say, mentors and wise people is so important. Thank you for sharing. I want to go back to something that you said when you were sharing your testimony about how you had those 10 years where you weren't walking with Jesus. And I feel like that's exactly where the enemy wants us to be. He wants us to be alone, and he wants us to believe the lies that keep us suppressed and down and defeated, right? But in the name of Jesus Christ, He gives us the truths that we need to hear that break us free from those chains of bondage. So I'm co-writing the sequel to my book with Amanda B. Scott. I shared with Brittany before we got started. Amanda has shared her story on my podcast, and she helps with abortion wounded retreats. So for men and women who could come, and she just said they are breaking the chains of bondage all day and sometimes all night long, and breaking those lies of the enemy. And one thing that I taught my children, I did homeschool my boys when they were younger, and we were learning our spelling words. And I remember telling them the I before E principle, and in believe, the word lie is in believe. And that's how I taught them to remember how to spell believe, is don't believe the lie. Well, they were early elementary school. And I remember my son coming home in late middle school, early high school. And he was like, Mom, I was writing the word believe today, and I was remembering what you told us. Don't believe the lie. So I know going from community to believing the lie to homeschooling, Mom, let me tell you, what you're telling your children now, they will remember. It is so sweet. It is so sweet. So I just wanted to put that little plug in there, and maybe that'll help somebody else remember not to believe the lies, right?
Yes, I love that. I'm going to use that on my kids too.
Yeah, there are a lot of moments like that come up in our conversations sometimes, and I don't even remember. We don't even remember what we say to these kiddos sometimes, but they're listening. Even when you think they're not listening, they're listening for sure. So what I know about healing is such a process, right? Right when we think we've got it all figured out, then there's another something that either triggers us or brings back some darkness that we have to add light to. How do you get through those moments when you are reminded of your past and when the enemy tries to shame you for that? How do you combat those moments?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I did recently share in one of my episodes something that I really haven't shared very publicly. But at the beginning of this pregnancy that I am currently in, I actually had some spotting that scared me. And I started to worry that I might be losing the baby. And I remember in that moment being triggered, almost immediately that it was my fault. And looking back, I'm like, man, why did you think that? These tragedies do happen and it's not your fault. It's not, God doesn't rain down punishment on you for your past. You had asked for forgiveness. Why would you automatically go there? And I can only say that it was the enemy trying to bring me back to that place of shame because, shame is one of his most favorite tools that he uses because it changes our identity. It makes us become our sin and not who God says we are. And I just remember feeling so low in that moment, but really realizing that I had to renew my mind again to realize that that was not true and that no matter what happened, whether my baby was okay or not, God was still sovereign and he loved me and he loved my baby and all was going to be okay. And, thankfully today my baby is still here and we're just waiting for her to be born. And I believe that experience has taught me a lot about what healing looks like because so often we think that one Bible study will help it or one therapy session will heal it. But in reality, I think healing, especially after abortion, is really a lifelong journey because it's accompanied by grief. And so we need to remember that and have those coping tools and that partnership with God, that relationship with him, so that when those moments arise, we know exactly where to go instead of going to maybe some of those unhealthy coping mechanisms that we used to have.
What does your relationship with Jesus look like? Do you have a morning quiet time or do you try to get that in the evening or with children and your busy mom? Share that with our audience.
Yes, so I love early morning quiet time. I am a morning person, so it just works for me. And I do enjoy getting up before my kids to do that. However, I got really legalistic with that for a while to the point where if my kids did wake up and I hadn't gotten to it, I would beat myself up about that or would just not do it. And I realized that a better approach would be to still do it. And it's might not be perfect that day. Kids are kids and they're excited, but kids are also watching. And so when they see mommy sit down to do her prayer journal and read her Bible, that's making an impression on them. So I do my best to stay in routine and do that in the quiet because I feel like my mind is a little bit more focused on my relationship with Jesus when it's really quiet and I don't have to listen to other things. But if my kids are up, I still want to be a good example for them. And how else are they going to know that should be important for them too as they grow? And so that's really been a foundational piece for me. But I also am really trying to be intentional about having some evening time too, which is a little more difficult when you're not necessarily a night person because you've got the nighttime routine of getting the kids in bed and, all the things. But I think it's really important to be able to start your day on that note and end your day on that note, no matter what that looks like. Maybe it's just 5 minutes of the Bible app that day, and you're going to read the verse of the day and the guided scripture. Or, maybe you have more time to sit down and do a full-on Bible study. I think that God meets us with so much grace in those moments.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. I'm a morning person too. There's nothing better than getting up. I have journals upon journals of when my boys were smaller. I would make an intentional effort to get up before them. And the first sentence in my journal is, Lord, please give us enough time together before the boys wake up And it never failed. As soon as I put that final period on that last sentence, I would see little eyes peeking at me around the corner, and I'm like, oh, just one more minute. It was sweet how he would answer those prayers. And sometimes the boys would just, cuddle up in the bed with me and I would still read for a little while or whatever. But you're right. They're watching, no doubt. I know that so many of our listeners are either mothers or grandmothers, and they're trying to lead their children in the world that we live in today. What kind of advice would you give them as a mom and an expectant mom looking to the future, really the future of the unknown? How do you stay grounded in your faith?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I have a little bit of a different perspective on some of those things because I am a younger millennial. And, there is nothing new under the sun. So, of course, the spiritual warfare has been around. And I think it just shifts to what it might look like depending upon what generation we're in. But for me as a millennial, I think the ushering in of technology and social media has been really prevalent. And that's really kind of relevant in my own story too. I won't get into it too much, but I had purchased a secret cell phone to communicate with my boyfriend that I was in a secret relationship and who he was the father of my child. And of course, there would have been other ways for me to communicate with him had technology not been available. But I think that's given me a different perspective on how to handle my own kids and just what safety looks like. Because I think that was kind of an experiment we all went through when all of that was becoming available and open. And I don't think any of us really could have seen what it might look like today. It's a beautiful thing because it allows us to have conversations like this and listen to uplifting things on, podcast apps or music apps. But at the same time, I think that it can get really dangerous. And I think as a mother, that's kind of one of the really big things that I'm thinking about right now as my kids grow older and just thinking about, how can I protect them from what is looking good and can be used for good, but can also be used for evil without me even knowing. And so I would just give encouragement that staying rooted in faith and giving it to God and trying to let go of that control, but also being aware is, a lot easier said than done, but one of the best things that we can do. And at the end of the day, what we can do is give our children to the Lord and dedicate them to Him and understand that they have that free will and just pray that they will use that free will to stay rooted in Him as they grow instead of drifting off and away from that relationship with Him.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even know that. So I'm so glad I asked. I love the word that you said is God kept pursuing you. And that's my prayer for my kids is, Lord, just pursue my children now who are now men. I'm so glad you had those mentors in your life. I pray for those mentors for my children as well. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because it is so important for us to have mentors and for us to mentor others. And I see that in your life, you've got both mentors and you're mentoring someone. Even if you don't know who it is, there are listeners who are listening that are appreciating what you have to share. And so tell us a little bit about that because that's spiritual maturity. When did you get to the place where you felt like that you could help other people?
Yeah, I really think a lot of that was due to the foundational healing that I went through and then having that accountability in women who had gone before me. And I got to a place where I was able to handle correction. So that's one thing I think that we as a society have a really hard time with because we don't like to be wrong. We have our way of doing things. And so sometimes when we get that constructive feedback, it can be a little hard to swallow that. But I've been really grateful for the mentors that I have because they're able to build me up and lift me up and compliment me. But if there's something that may need some correction, maybe it's not quite biblical. Maybe they heard something I said in a podcast episode and they're like, hey, I think there's a different perspective there. I'm able to listen to them and receive that well. And I don't think I'd be able to do that if I wasn't actively pursuing my spiritual growth with the Lord. And so that's something that I've had to learn too, is when you're mentoring someone, how do you lead them in the best way? How do you share the truth with them in a way that is sharing truth, but also building them up? Because we don't want to give them so much constructive feedback that makes them feel like, "Oh, why am I even doing this?" And so it's kind of a balance, but I am just really grateful to have examples of women who are having a daily rhythm of meeting with God and seeking Him in the answers that they need instead of seeking the world, and then are modeling that for me and teaching me how to model that for someone else.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that the Lord healed you, so you are at a place where you can help others. I'm so grateful that the Lord healed me so that I could get to this place. What would you tell the young woman that's listening that is still struggling, either with self-doubt, addictions, destructive relationships, where she just doesn't feel like she has a future? She may hear you talking and say, that's for Brittany, good for her, but I just don't know if I can ever get to that point. How would you encourage her?
Yeah, I think that when we're in the middle of that, it seems insurmountable for us to be able to get to the other side, because we hear testimonies and we hear stories, and I think those are really important, but we don't hear everything. So you can listen to even just a 1 hour testimony, but that person didn't heal in an hour. So it's easy for us to go, well, that's not possible for me because they have this wild transformation and it was only an hour for me to listen to. In reality, it could have taken them years. It could have taken them years of failing and trying again and getting back up. And so I would focus on, if someone's listening and they're in that place, I wouldn't focus on being perfect, and I wouldn't focus on having the goal of being healed tomorrow. I would focus on how can you be 1% better, and how can you do that along with God, because God can take 1% and make it 110%. You just have to trust Him and have faith and not give up, even if you have a hard day, even if you slip up, because we all do. Not a single one of us is without sin, and we fall short every day. But the difference is we get back up and we trust God and we just keep moving forward.
Amen, sister. That's so true. So tell us more about what you have to offer. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, your coaching, and anything else. I know you have a freebie on your website. I did see that. So share with us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast really is geared towards a few different people, mostly women who have had abortions who are seeking healing through a Christ-centered method. So maybe you have had an abortion and you've tried all of the secular things and you're just still having questions. I really love just to share God's word and apply those healing principles aside biblical principles. And so I would encourage anybody that's listening to this to go listen, even if you haven't had an abortion, because you might learn something and know how to help someone else who has had one and needs help. So that's the first place I would go. And then I do also support women through coaching. I do one-on-one coaching for women who, a group of people is scary. It's very biblical to heal in community, but I think it's also really scary when you are hiding something so secretively to then go, oh, I'm just going to go tell a group of strangers about it. And so I do one-on-one coaching, but I do also have a group program, and it is an evergreen program, so anyone can join at any time. And I have a framework that women can go through to find healing, but it's a biblical framework. So it really is rooted in the biblical truth of God's word and helps women really recognize the grief that they're experiencing from abortion and how to not move past the grief, but move forward with it. So I would encourage anybody listening to go find healing, because it's much better to step out and be afraid than to stay stuck, because that fear will quickly turn to surrender and hope and peace, because that's what God does. So I would just encourage anyone to do that. And then if someone is interested in learning a little bit more, I do have a freebie called the Permission to Grieve devotional. It's a one-entry devotional that really talks about what post-abortion grief looks like, because a lot of women hear that word and they're like, well, I don't have permission to grieve my baby because this was my decision. And so we go through the biblical evidence as to why you do have permission from God to grieve your baby or babies lost to abortion, and how you can start to move forward in freedom from that.
I can see where that would be very sensitive.
Yes. So I do have a couple of episodes on my podcast that are recordings of coaching that I have done with some of my coaching clients, and they have given me permission to do that. But I do not have a lot of clients who are willing to do that just because of the secretive nature. Many of them end up, after healing, still not widely sharing their stories just because of how just taboo of a topic it is. They're just not ready for the world to know. But I do have some, so it is a little bit helpful for people to kind of get a sense of what that looks like by listening to those.
About how much time do you spend a week or a month in your coaching business? Because I know there's probably women listening to this who are either writing and they've written the book and now they're thinking about starting the platform. And so just to give them an idea of everything you're doing, how much time does that take?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say anywhere between 5 to 10 hours per week. That's kind of what I've gotten it down to be able to just make sure that I'm who I want to be in every area of my life. And I have found that that's very doable if you have a really good system and a really good method of keeping everything organized. So it can take some time to get there and is a lot of trial and error, but prioritization and just looking at, what's important that I have to do this week to be the best wife, the best mom, and the best coach for my clients. And then I prioritize my tasks around that. And that has made a huge difference in how I approach my coaching business.
Yeah. And I want to encourage our listeners, if you don't have a coach, get a coach. My publisher once said, everybody needs a coach. And I just thought, I don't know if I have the resources to spend on writing my book and spend on coaching. But coaching actually will save you time and money in the long run because, you're just repeating some of the same cycles that you just need someone to help push you forward and keep you moving in the right direction. And so I just want to encourage our listeners, if they feel like they need a coach to help them to heal, to get in touch with Brittany and let her help you move forward in that. Because I'm just a believer that God has a plan and a purpose for all of us. And if we stay stuck in that shame and that regret, then we're not being obedient to the call that God has for us. And I've heard a lot lately that, if you're not being obedient, that's disobedience. And I just want to say there's a grace for that too. There's a lot of grace for that. And God's timing is not always our timing. But I know when God called me to write, it took me 10 years to step into that calling. And now that I see the fruit of it. And so I want our listeners to hear there is fruit for you, friend. There is fruit for you. And it is sweet. It is so sweet. So thank you so much, Brittany. Is there anything else you would like to leave our audience with today as she's listening? And maybe she's in the middle of her grief. Maybe she's in the middle of her healing. And what is that word that you would leave her with today to help her to move forward?
Yeah, I would just say that no matter where you are, you're not alone. And I know that it really feels lonely, especially when you're dealing with something that you feel you need to hide and keep secret. But even if we just look at the statistics, 1 in 4 women will have at least one abortion by the age of 45. 1 in 6 people sitting in church on any given Sunday have participated in an abortion in some way. And over 70% of women having abortions are identifying as Christian. You can rest assured that you are not alone and that there are people out there who love you and want to help you. And the Lord loves you and meets you with that compassion and mercy and desires to see you come home to him. So don't be discouraged in that isolation. Allow your grief to move you forward to be set free.
What a great way to end this podcast. I just want to thank you again, Brittany, for being here. I want to remind our audience to go to BrittanyPoppe.com, get to know her better, get that freebie, and grab her as a coach. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great, saved, and strong day.